All right, we'll give everybody a few seconds to trickle in here, and then we can get started. All right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar brought to you by Bayer Crop Science. My name is Quentin Moorhead. I'm the National Account Manager of Top Crop Manager in Potatoes in Canada. I'm joined today by three members of the Bayer Market Development Agronomy team, Kate Hadley, Sam Clemens, and Amanda Fedorchuk, along with a panel of farmers, Quentin Cubbin, Rob Page, and Brady Ferris. Today, during our session, this group will discuss weed management, what you can do to manage resistance, what solutions are available, factors to consider, and how you can effectively manage weeds this year while keeping your crop rotation open for next year. Thanks to Bayer for sponsoring our session today. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees and registrants approximately 24 hours after our live broadcast. This session is scheduled to run for about 60 minutes. The group will speak for about 45 minutes, and following their presentation, we'll open the floor for questions. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them into the questions tab found on your computer screen. This webinar has been approved for 1 CCA, CEU, and integrated pest management, and further instructions for submission will follow the presentation. That's going to be it for me, so I'll let Kate, Sam, and Amanda take it away.
Thanks, Quinn. As you said, my name is Amanda Fedorchuk, and I'm the Market Development Representative out of Northwest Saskatchewan.
And I'm Sam Clemis. I'm the Market Development Agronomist for Central Manitoba, currently based out of Carman.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Hadley. I'm the Market Development Agronomist based out of Saskatoon. And with us today, we have three growers from Western Canada, and we'll give them a chance to introduce themselves now. So, Rob, let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Rob Page. I farm in southern Alberta alongside my dad. We farm about 2,400 acres of peas, wheat, barley, and canola, half of it which is irrigated. And we're kind of looking forward to this big snowstorm that's supposed to be blowing in here this week.
Yeah, I hope you get some snow cover. You definitely need it down here. Thanks, Rob. Quinn, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Gwen Cubbin. I'm based out of North Battleford. We farm about 5,000 acres. Farm with my dad and my uncle. We have canola, wheat, peas, lentils, barley, and oats. So try and be as diverse as we can up here.
Great. Whereabouts do you farm, Quinn?
In North Battleford.
Great. Thank you. Welcome. And Brady, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Brady Ferris. I farm on a small family farm of about 2,000 acres near Radisson, Saskatchewan. It's about 30 minutes west of Saskatoon on Highway 16. We grow mainly small grains like barley, wheat, canola, peas. I have a background in agronomy from the U of S. I also used to work with Bayer, and I work briefly with AAFC as well.
Great. Thank you, Brady. And thanks to our grower panel. We're going to go through some content now, and we'll bring you back at the end to get your perspective on the topic today. So for today's webinar, we have a pretty full agenda, and we're going to touch on the current state of herbicide resistance, is focusing on Western Canada and really on wild oats. Then we'll get into how we can manage and delay resistance in our wild oat populations with some integrated weed management. And then we'll get into really talking about varroa effects and how that fits in with that resistance management strategy. And then at the end, we'll have the grower panel. And of course, we'll be taking questions from the audience. So we'll get started here. And we're going to start with the big picture. So looking at the current state of herbicide resistance in the whole world, this map, the darker color red, shows the countries that have more cases of herbicide resistance. And you'll really see, when you think of countries that have a lot of grain production, the US, Brazil, Australia, and Canada, of course, these are the ones where we're starting to see more resistant weeds develop. So in Canada, we currently have 56 unique herbicide resistant weeds. And in those weeds, something like kochia, there can be multiple herbicide resistances in just that one weed. So there are about 128 cases of herbicide resistance in Canada today. And here's how that resistance in Canada has really developed. So it's a pretty exponential curve. Hopefully we're flattening out, but as you can see in the last 3 years here, we are seeing more cases of herbicide resistance pop up in a bunch of different groups. So we're starting to see more and more group 9 resistance popping up, and we're starting to see resistance develop in more grass seed species. The latest one we have there is foxtail barley to group 1 in Alberta, and that's something that's really concerning. So we really need to watch what we're doing in our grass crops like wheat and barley. So when we're looking at wild oats, that's the topic of today's presentation. The next few slides here are taken from Hugh Becky's paper from 2020 on herbicide-resistant weeds in Western Canada from 2012 to 2017. And what they did is they randomly selected about 800 fields from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba and did a pre-harvest survey. So they asked growers, what crops are being grown? What was your herbicide program? And did you have any weed escapes in those fields? And about 70% of those fields, they had wild oat weed escapes. And so they collected wild oat seeds before harvest. And what they did is they tested those wild oat seeds to see what resistance was present in those fields. So starting with this graph, we have group 1 resistant wild oats. And these are going to be the little red dots on the map. And as you can see from the numbers on this slide, there's a lot of group 1 resistant wild oats across Western Canada. Almost 80% of the samples tested in Manitoba came back as group 1 resistant, and about 60% of the samples from Alberta and Saskatchewan came back as group 1 resistant. So those are pretty high numbers. I know I'm a little bit concerned about that. But that trend it's trending more and more resistant every time they do these surveys. So definitely something we need to keep an eye on. As we go to the next slide here, we have the group 2 resistant wild oats. And group 2 resistance, definitely not as prevalent as that group 1 resistant wild oats, but it is slowly starting to climb. So again, Manitoba leads the pack, and I don't know if that's something they want to lead in, but about 40% of their wild oats are group 2 resistant, and a little bit lower in Alberta and Saskatchewan. So something to keep in mind, that is a growing resistance, but definitely not as prevalent as that group 1. The next slide here, so these are the little green dots on the map, and these are going to be cases of wild oats that have both group 1 and group 2 resistance in them. So with these wild oats, you're really not going to be able to control them in crop in your wheat or barley crops. There's no other modes of action for in crop when you have group 1 or 2 resistance. And with the graphs here, we're starting to see more and more wild oat populations with group 1 and 2 resistance. So kind of averaging about 25 to 30% of the wild oat sampled in this paper. So something, again, to keep an eye on. So we wanted to show this market share breakdown of the products that are used in our cereal grass herbicide market. So about 60 to 65% of the market is group 1s. And remember, we're hitting, 70% of wild oats in Western Canada might have that group 1 resistance from that paper. So a large part of this market still is group 1s. And I think there's a really big opportunity for group 2s to kind of manage that group 1 resistance. We do have a lot more acres of wheat in Western Canada where we can use group 1s and 2s. So I think that is a really big opportunity for us.
So thanks, Kate, for kind of setting the stage and where we are in terms of herbicide resistance right now. But just kind of switch gears into, we've introduced the problem. Let's maybe look at some solutions or how we can kind of reduce our risk for selecting for more resistance. So our first and foremost, always rotating herbicide groups with different modes of action. So rotating within season, but also rotating within your rotation is very important when it comes to prolonging the lifespan of these herbicides. Always following the label rates and timings. So following the label rates for sure, not cutting rates. That's going to lead to resistance in some cases. But timings is also a big one. So larger weeds in general are harder to control. They're more likely to metabolize these herbicides and maybe outgrow them. The other thing with timing is quite often a grower might think, well, maybe I'll push my herbicide application a few days, make sure all the weeds are up, and then we'll get a better kill on the weeds that are there. We'll kill as many as possible. Well, unfortunately, the weeds that are already growing are still growing those extra few days. So sometimes they might be growing to the point that they're maybe out of stage for those labels, as well as larger weeds harder to control. The other aspect of this is really looking at that critical period of weed control. So in wheat, this is the 1 to 3 leaf stage. So the critical period of weed control is when you're really concerned about yield losses due to crop competition. So that's the point in a wheat life cycle that you need to make sure the weed control is maximized. So pushing off our herbicide applications a few days to get a better kill might be sacrificing some yield in the long run. So just really being cognizant of that. And then some other non-herbicide options for reducing our selection pressure, like planting clean seed that has no weed seeds in it, increasing our crop's competitiveness, whether that's through an increase in seeding rate, a decrease in our row spacing, or proper fertility, and fertility that is able to get to the crop and not to the weeds. Really understanding the biology of the weeds that are present in our field. So knowing what to spray on what weeds is really important when it comes to picking herbicides for our farms. And then the last point here I want to make is just overall reducing the number of weed populations that are exposed to a herbicide application is the #1 goal. An example that I've heard recently was if you are spraying a field and there's 1,000 wild oats in one patch, there's a lot greater chance that one of those is genetically resistant to a herbicide than if there's 3 weeds in that patch. So overall, just really wanting to reduce our our weeds that are exposed to those herbicide applications. So just looking at graminicides and cereals, Kate's already mentioned it. We have very limited options when it comes to in-crop herbicides for cereals. So we kind of put together a kind of mock strategy in terms of our graminicide management. So we have a rotation of barley. There might be some wheat and durum, canola, and a pulse. Really saving our group 1s for our barley, and then using our group 2 in our wheat and durum. And then you have canola in that rotation, maybe looking to options like a TrueFlex or a TrueFlex Liberty Link to get that group 9 for our wild oat control, rather than relying on a group 1 if we are spraying our Liberty canola. And again, at that last point, just making sure that if we know we have group 1 resistance or group 2 resistance, really not relying on those specific modes of actions to control those populations.
Yeah, so with these resistant weed challenges that you're dealing with in your fields, we're always trying to come up with solutions. And as Amanda mentioned, part of a good integrated weed management strategy includes the use of tank mixes with multiple effective modes of action. And our newest cross-spectrum herbicide, VaroFX, provides a really great opportunity to use effective modes of action for those resistant wild oats and kochia. So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about it. So what is VaroFX? So VaroFX is registered for use in spring wheat and winter wheat. It contains a group 2 TCM. And then what makes it different from Varo is the addition of a group 4 fluroxapyr. And the combination of these 2 actives really provides excellent control of those tough grass weeds, including those group 1 resistant wild oats. And then this load of fluroxapyr, the 118 grams of active ingredient per hectare, that is among the highest when compared to what's available in the market. So if you are dealing with some larger weeds, or maybe you've had some escapes in your pre-burn, VaroFX really does have the power behind it to tackle those. And then a really exciting feature of VaroFX is the emulsifiable concentrate formulation, and it is the only group 2 EC on the market. So I'll discuss the advantages of this in a minute. And VaroFX is available in a 20-acre jug or a 320-acre drum. And then tank mix partners for VaroFX can be flexible. So this allows you to choose a partner based on the weeds present in your field and not by label limitations. So we'll get into more detail on the tank mix partners in a bit here. So as I mentioned, VaroFX is an emulsifiable concentrate formulation, and it is the only Group 2 EC on the market. And current Group 2 products on the market are typically an oil dispersion or a suspension concentrate formulation, which can be a little more difficult to mix and to clean out of your tanks, which may also result in situations where Group 2s have been shied away from. So the value of this formulation is really around how easy it is for you to work with. So it's easy to mix, it's easy to handle, it's easy to clean out of tanks and booms, which also lowers the risk for any herbicide hangup. And then in situations where you're dealing with heavy grass populations, this formulation is also really good for coverage, which also results in better uptake and then more consistent control. And then no external surfactant is required with this formulation, so one less step for you to worry about. And then our market development team had the opportunity to get some hands-on experience with VaroFX and test it in our field scale trial program this past year. And we received a lot of positive and consistent feedback on its mixing and handling properties. So these are some direct quotes from the market development agronomists and their cooperators that really just further emphasize the benefits of the EC formulation. So this video was created by our market development team, and the purpose is to provide a good visual that further demonstrates the mixing needs
is a new cross-spectrum
of
control
VaroFX
product and the only Group 2 emulsifiable concentrate product in the market today. The EC formulation not only has great product handling and dispersion qualities, but also has great cleanup characteristics. This video will show the advantages of Bayer's new VaroFX herbicide.
This first video segment shows how VaroFX herbicide disperses quicker and more uniformly into the tank compared to Simplicity Go Dry herbicide, Everest herbicide, and Varo herbicide. Each of the herbicides going into the bottles are at label rate with water volumes equivalent to 10 gallons per acre. This next video shows equal amounts of water being poured over each of the products to demonstrate clean out ease of VaroFX herbicide in a jug, tank, or can handler.
Okay, so we've seen kind of the formulation benefits. We heard from Sam about the benefits of VaroFX, but we got to let the data speak for itself. Just really looking at how VaroFX performs in a field. So this was taken from the market development trials across Western Canada over the past few years. And these graphs are showing the averages of the weed control across all of the trials. The individual dots are representing the specific trials. So what I really want to draw your attention to here are these first two bars here. So this is just moving from our Varo to our VaroFX. The only difference between these two in terms of wild oat control is that EC formulation, and you're seeing that 3% bump in weed control. And this goes back to what Sam was saying earlier about how that EC formulation is better allowing that herbicide to get into these wild oats for better control. But overall, across the board, you can see VaroFX performing extremely well, especially in comparison to some of the other premium Group 2 products in the marketplace today. And now if we look at the broadleaf control, we're specifically pulling out kochia, but the data is the same for all broadleaves. But we really wanted to emphasize kochia just because of the resistance issues, and it's been a hot topic, especially this winter. But really the same thing is being shown here. When you move from Varo to VaroFX, really showing the benefit of that fluroxapyr. You can see a couple sites with some resistance to the Group 4, but seeing an even further bump in that weed control when you add a tank mix partner. So across the board, you look at Infinity, Buctril M, Thumper, seeing extremely good control of your kochia populations across all of our trials in Western Canada. But the most exciting thing that I see on this graph is how close these dots are to one another. So what this is telling me is that in all of our individual trials across Western Canada, we are seeing extremely consistent control of our kochia with that VaroFX Infinity tank mix partner. The dots that are spread apart are showing maybe some inconsistencies, some resistance issues, but this is really showing how strong Infinity is on our kochia, and VaroFX being a very good fit with Infinity for both our grassy weeds and our broadleaf weeds. This is also showing the importance of adding that tank mix partner. So you can see just by spraying VaroFX, you're getting good weed control, but this is really showing how much better your weed control can be by adding that tank mix partner. And we have a lot of flexible options when it comes to tank mix partners for VaroFX.
Yes, so as Amanda mentioned, VaroFX does have broadleaf weeds on label, but it is not meant to be a standalone product. It must be paired with a broadleaf tank mix partner. And this slide is a really good snapshot of some tank mix options broken out into tiers. So some baseline options would be 2,4-D or MCPA. One watch out with 2,4-D is it does limit your window of application. So instead of that kind of 2 to 6 leaf stage, you're narrowed down to about a 4 to 6 leaf stage. So just something to keep in mind. But those are some options for if you're dealing with smaller weeds like kochia in the 2 to 8 leaf stage. But really our main focus will be on our core tank mix partners. So Buctril M or Thumper. And that's a really good option for kochia up to 10 centimeters. And then Infinity would be our premium option. That also would provide the largest window of application and really the best option for those large and tough to control weeds. So if you're dealing with some bigger kochia, like up to 15 centimeters. And then with our core and premium options, you are getting 3 to 4 modes of action. So really great options from a resistance management standpoint, as here's an opportunity to add in a group 6 with the Buctril M or Thumper, or a group 6 N27 with the Infinity, and take care of that resistant kochia. So one of the key observations our market development team noticed, and in our trials this past season, was really just how rapid the activity of VaroFX was. So these are some great before and after photos taken by our MD team that really just demonstrates that activity that was observed. So starting in the top left, here's a picture of a volunteer canola on the day of application, and then it was sprayed with VaroFX and Buctril M. And then the photo below is 7 days after application. And then on the top right, we're looking at a stinkweed, and that was sprayed with the VaroFX and Infinity tank mix. And then below is what it looked like 12 days after application. And then we've got some grass weeds pictured here, starting with barnyard grass on the left. That was sprayed with VaroFX and Infinity. And this picture was taken 14 days after application. So the grasses do die off a little bit slower, but it's nicely on its way. And then on the right-hand side is the Varroa effects in Infinity that was sprayed on some green foxtail, and this was pictured 9 days after application.
Great. So I just want to remind everyone about the staging for group 2s, especially Varro and Varro FX. So Varro FX has the same crop staging as the original Varro OD formulation. And that staging is 1 to 6 leaves with a maximum of 3 tillers. But the thing to really remember is you want to apply Varro and Varro FX before jointing, which is the presence of the first node. So the best way to check your crop for the proper staging is to get out, scout your field, get off the headlands. Those are going to be a little bit more advanced in their staging. So get into the parts of the field where the bulk of your yield is coming from. Pull some plants, and then you can just run your fingers along that main stem and feel for a bump. If you feel a bump on that main stem, that would be the first node developing. And that means you've reached the end of your application staging. You can't spray Varro or Varro FX on that field. And what that first node is actually the developing cereal head. So that plant is moving from the vegetative growth and starting the reproductive growth stage. So you can have the potential to hurt that developing cereal head if you do spray Varro FX when the first node is present. But Amanda was talking about early weed control and the critical weed-free period for cereal crops. That 1 to 3 leaf stage is perfect. It's the right time to spray your Varro FX and get your crop off to a really nice clean start. So if you're going in nice and early, you shouldn't have to worry about jointing at all. One thing to point out here is under droughty conditions, you really want to watch the staging of your crop. We have a general statement on the label that says do not apply Varro FX 35 days after seeding. That's just a general guideline. What we really want you to do is get out into that field and scout your field to see the actual developmental stage of your crop. So just if you want to take anything away, spray early in that 1 to 3 leaf stage if you can, but on label 1 to 6 leaf and before that first node is present. A few other key reminders, just pulling together what Amanda and Sam have been talking to us about. So Varro FX is for spring and winter wheat only, no durum. The EC formulation is just a little bit too hot for durum. So if you are in a durum growing area, it's best to stick with the original Varro formulation. You should never apply Varro FX alone. Always mix it with a broadleaf tank mix partner. And that's really flexible. Like Sam was talking about, you can go with just a basic phenoxy if your weed spectrum is pretty limited and your weeds are small, or you can go to something like a Buctril M for a little bit bigger weeds, or something like Infinity if you're not worried about recropping restrictions to lentils with the Infinity, or you have a little bit larger weeds and a more varied weed spectrum. So always ensure the proper crop staging, like I just talked about for that group 2 application. And then again, like Sam talked about with the 2,4-D tank mixes, whether you're going 2,4-D alone or something like a thumper, that really narrows up your window of application, starting from the 4-leaf stage to that 6-leaf stage prior to the first node being present. So just keep that in mind if that's the tank mix partner you choose. But again, very flexible to match your tank mix partner to the weeds that you do have in your fields. And that brings us to the end of the content that we have prepared today. And we'd like to bring our grower panel back on video. And so we'll give them just a couple seconds here. Looks like they're all popping up. Okay, well, welcome back. Rob Page from Southern Alberta. We have Quinn Cubbin from North Battleford, and we have Brady Ferris from that same general area in Western Saskatchewan. So welcome, guys. And we have a question here that we'd like all of you to answer, and we're interested to hear your response. So how do you manage herbicide resistance on your own farms? And we'll start with Brady.
I think the first step for us most obviously is crop rotation in our area, just due to, logistics and money problems. It's kind of we've lost a lot of our diversity in rotation. So on a year like this where canola prices have kind of plummeted, it might make sense to add a few legumes back into your rotation so you can get some different types of chemistry active in your farm. And then it goes to tank mixes like Kate mentioned earlier, trying to get as many different groups active as possible in your rotation is vital. And then our last stage is within groups, trying to mix different actives, especially for pre-seed like group 14s, trying to manage group 14 resistance. We try to mix as many different actives as possible. Something also that I think I'm going to be looking into this year, depending on how much moisture we get, is maybe trying some winter annuals, throwing in some winter annuals just to try and shift some different weed pressures. So if we get another dry year, we've been dry for the last 3 years. So if we get another dry year, we might look into some winter annuals as well.
Yeah, that's, you just gave us a whole long list of practices. So changing up your crop rotation, really focusing on tank mixes with different actives, and then trying something, maybe out of the ordinary with those winter annuals. So that sounds like you're doing a lot on your farm. So has that been successful, or is that something you're just kind of trying all at once here?
Yes and no. As for wild oats, I think we've been pretty good. Group 2 wise, especially, we don't have a lot of group 2 resistance yet. Group 1, I mean, there's always some group 1 resistant wild oats. I basically assume all oats are group 1 resistant at this point. Kochia, we struggle with a little bit. Like I said, we've been dry for the last few years, so it's been for us just trying to keep our head above water with we haven't had a lot of crop competition, so we've been just trying to keep it at a consistent level until we can get some better crop competition.
Right. Yeah, I'm really hoping we get some rain this year across the West, but yeah, that's a good point to bring up. So do you see Varroa effects fitting in on your farming operation?
Yeah, I think we did our plot last year. It was a small 40-acre test plot. I was fairly happy, to be honest. I was kind of pushing the limits a little bit. It was getting a little bit gusty when I was spraying it, and it still performed just as well as the velocity I was spraying before. This year, I think I'm going to be adding in a couple tanks of it just to see how it does on a full field scale. Last year, like I said, I used velocity, so I did use quite a bit of group 27. So this year, I don't think it'll fully fit into my rotation, but again, next year, if it does well on my full field, then it'll probably be fully into my rotation.
Great. Thank you, Brady, for sharing that with us. Quinn, what do you think? How do you manage herbicide resistance on your farm?
So kind of what we're doing is crop rotation as well. So that allows us to have a herbicide rotation. And so we also use herbicide stacking. So we'll use more than one group and sometimes 3 groups if we can, just to, try and get the best kill as we can. Also kind of increasing our water volume while spraying just to get a better overall coverage. Just, if we increase that water volume and then get a good kill, and then proper timing. So if we let the weeds kind of get too big, we're just not going to see the efficacy of the herbicide. So just overall, just a bunch of different options that we're using. And then one thing that maybe this year is increased seeding rate. So I've been to a few talks and they've kind of said that increasing your seeding rate can help with crop competition, so or weed competition. So just overall, trying a bunch of different things on our farm.
Yeah, so that sounds really excellent. You gave us a big long list of different strategies that you're also using to manage weed resistance on your farm. So after the presentation today, do you see Varroa effects fitting in on your farming operation?
Yeah, I do. I think that from the trial that we did last year, we've seen good control. We tank mixed it with Infinity FX. So the field that we tried it on, We were thinking there was some group 1 wild oats, and then we had some kochia in there. So that's why we put those 2 products together, and we saw really good control on that. So some of our stuff that is getting more kochia, I think that it could be an option to use that Varo FX, and then with Infinity just to get our group 1 oats, and then use the Infinity for the kochia.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. Thanks, Quinn. And so, yeah, we'll go over to Rob now. How do you manage herbicide resistance on your farm?
Well, kind of a lot of the same things. We have found over the years that adjusting the pH of our water prior to mixing our chemical really helps with the efficiency and the effectiveness of it. We've also slowly been increasing our seeding rate as well, especially on our irrigated land. But a lot of it is to do, I think, with timing and weed staging and scouting your fields really well to know exactly what's in your field, because walking into one corner of the field can have some weeds in it that the rest of the field doesn't. So covering the whole field is usually a good way to find out what's there for sure.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
Good. So, if my memory serves correct, you weren't able to try Varo FX last year. After the presentation today, do you think that would be a fit for your farm?
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it's something that we could use, and tank mixing it with Infinity on some wheat acres this year will definitely, I think, give it a try.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Rob, I think we'll just stick with you for the next question, if that's okay. We're just wondering how in the past with you, when you're mixing your herbicides, how has product formulation kind of affected you? Have you ever seen carryover or clean out? Has clean out ever been an issue for you? Have you ever seen some herbicides get hung up in booms or?
We fortunately haven't had any wrecks. With the dissolvables and the dry formulas, we really try and take extra steps while cleaning out the sprayer, because we have found buildup in the bottom of filter housings and in nozzles and stuff like that. So moving away from the dry formulas is sometimes it is nice for package sizing, but as far as clean out and stuff, we take extra steps when cleaning out those. And even while mixing, we notice that you have to be a little more cognizant of fully dissolving these products in the handler before it gets sucked up into the sprayer.
Right. I know that's good. It sounds like an EC formulation might make things easier for you.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll jump over to you, Quinn. So the next question we wanted to ask was, how do you make your herbicide applications successful on your farm?
I guess almost to reiterate what I said for question 1 there, it'd be, proper timing, follow the recommended label rates, increase our water volume if we have to. And then I think one thing too that maybe I could mention is we do use edge a little bit. So we use a residual like that, and proper mixing, I guess, of that into the soil just to control the wild oats better before canola or lentil fields. So be something that we do to control.
Yeah, absolutely. All really great points, Quinn. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll go over to Brady now. We have a question here for you. So we wanted to get your thoughts on the take mix partners that we shared with the group. What do you think would work best on your farm? And do you think every acre on your farm would be the same in terms of tank mix partner?
No, yes and no. We have lots of fields that have quite a bit of variability in different weed pressures, especially for fields that I pick up, maybe new rented land or something. There's different weed pressures that I gotta, in particular, I have one field that has quite a bit of resistant kochia. So I try to tailor it a little bit to whatever weed pressure I have. especially if I have a problem that I'm aware of. As far as tank mixes go, I always like having a lot of flexibility when it comes to tank mixes, and having an EC from the charts you guys showed, it seems like it's kind of a free, what it was, 3% bump or so and kill. But I think more importantly is consistency for us. Like I said, sometimes boundaries get pushed a little bit, and having a herbicide that you can rely on is pretty important for us. So I think it was Amanda that showed those plots seem to be pretty tight, consistent kill on all your fields. So I think for us, that's most important, because when you're out in the field, like, it's nice to get an extra 3% kill, but it's hard to see that when you're walking out in the field. It's hard to see an extra 3% bump. But what you can see is if you have a huge disaster where a chemical just doesn't work properly. So if you have something that works consistently, I think that's best.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, 3% kind of looks like a lot on a graph, but you might not notice that. Do you do anything on your farm to keep track of like kind of weed populations in a field? Do you use notebooks or any digital things, or how do you keep track of what weeds are in each field?
Yeah, I mean, a part of it is eyeballing and scouting. I do use field view, so if I see something that concerns me, I'll drop a pin somewhere. And then in the winter, when I'm making plans, I'll go through some of those pins, and so I can refresh myself. Um, Note taking, stuff like that is how we manage it. Yeah, cleaning out equipment as best you can to try and reduce spread of resistant weeds. I mean, good luck trying to get all kochia weeds out of your combine, but you do your best as best you can to slow it down at least.
Yeah, that's a really good point there. So you blow off your combines between
Yeah.
fields, or
Yeah, if we have, especially like I mentioned, a field with a lot of resistant kochia, we try to clean it off as best we can. Just a rough cleaning just to slow, like I said, slow down the spread of those resistant weeds.
yeah, that's a great idea. Thanks, Brady. So we're gonna move on to our last question here, and we'll stick with you since we have you off mute. So what do you value when making product decisions for your farm? What are the maybe top 2 or 3 things that you look for when making decisions?
Well, I'll just get the obvious one out of the way. Price is pretty important. It's got to be competitive with other products. I am willing to pay more, a few dollars more if it's more convenient. I know for some guys, not particular for us, we're more of a small farm, but if you're a farm with a lot of hired guys, having a product that reduces the amount of tank mixes you have to do is better for people who aren't as knowledgeable on tank mixing. It kind of reduces your risk. Programming wise, it is nice. I wouldn't say programming is a make or break, but it might push you over the edge if you're deciding between a couple different products. To get an extra $1 or $2 back an acre is nice for us. So I think probably top 3 are price, programming, and how it fits into my rotation resistance wise and what I've used previously.
Great, thank you for that, Brady. We appreciate you sharing those. We'll go over to you, Rob. What do you value in making product decisions for your farm?
Well, like Brady, we do watch price quite extensively, but price doesn't sometimes come into play when the products aren't going to work the way they're supposed to. The rotation is the main thing, I guess. You can't keep using the same product over and over and over and expect to get the same results. And also past successes. We have some chemicals that have worked really well for us over the years. I know every year can be different, but we do go back to products that have been successful for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, you want consistency. You know, if you know something works, it's gonna work. So yeah, that's a great thing to bring up. And we'll go over to you, Quinn. What do you value when making your product decisions?
Yeah, much like the other 2 guys, the be price as well. We're looking kind of for the best deal, but if you're running into some resistance, sometimes you got to pay a little bit more. So I think resistance would be another one too that we're looking at, right? If we need to spend a little extra money to control those weeds, then we're going to do it. And then the formulation too. I know that there's some group 2s out there, like the suspension concentrates or whatever, that they tend to stick in the tank a little bit more than the EC formulation. So just the ease of clean out, I guess, and then we're not worrying if we did a good job or not. Just make sure that we got it all cleaned out. So those would be kind of the top 3 for me.
Yeah, great, Quinn. Thanks for sharing. So it sounds like price is really important. All 3 of you mentioned that first right off the bat. But also you all did mention resistance management and rotating or stacking modes of action. So that's really good to hear, especially after this webinar we just did. And then you also, the 3 of you had some different answers too with Rob, your past successes, what's worked for you, you want consistency, and then with you, Quinn, with formulations. So yeah, that's good to hear. Obviously, everyone's farming operations are different, and we're all looking for some of the same things, but sometimes different things out of products. So great to hear your feedback on that.
I think that's all we had for questions for you guys. I will push it back to some slides. You guys have a free few minutes before we take some questions at the end. But we'll get back to the PowerPoint presentation here if I share these. Okay, so just to wrap it all up with a nice bow, we put together some key takeaways so that we are hoping that you can take away from this webinar. The first one with VaroFX, we've talked a lot about the formulation and how excited we are about the formulation, but VaroFX is a lot more than just a new formulation, it's a new solution. So really, we're excited about the flexibility of it, that definitely the EC formulation, being able to put it on many acres across Western Canada. We're very excited for the future of VaroFX. That enhanced grassy weed control. So as I talked about in the graphs there, moving into that EC formulation, really allowing for that increase in weed control just because of that ability for that herbicide to get into plants easier. And again, the flexibility, not only that flexibility to create a tank mix that targets your weed population, but that recrop issue isn't a concern with VaroFX. Again, looking at the recrop labels on your tank mix partners, but VaroFX very flexible. That ease of use, we said it 100 times, very excited about it. And then how easy it goes into solution through the chem handler, clean out of the sprayer. We know how potent group 2s can be at low doses. So being able to get it through and out of a sprayer is very nice for growers and their confidence that they're not going to have issues with hangups in booms. And then also that true bulk stability. So able to get those 320 acre drums is really awesome for VaroFX. So with that, that wraps up what we have for you today. This is our fun little giveaway. Pull out your phones, pull up the camera, and then scan this QR code. And this will take you to a website that has the formulation video that we watched earlier in this presentation. But it'll also give you a form to fill out to win a VaroFX air hockey table, which would look awesome in your shop, as well as 160 acres each of VaroFX and Buck for Limb. So scan this QR code. If you miss it, I believe it's coming out in the email that'll follow this webinar, but definitely enter your name in for that. I think it closes at the end of the month, so you have a few days yet. And with that, wanted to say thank you, especially to our growers for joining us this morning, Top Crop Manager for having us, and well, thank you for joining. We did get approved for CCA credits. So again, you can scan this QR code and get yourself a CCA credit. So that's all I think we had.
Yeah, thanks for that. We got some questions here, so I don't know if you want to jump into those now. We can leave the CCA credit up while people do that, but we do have a few questions from the audience. So I can jump right into that.
Sure.
You indicated that Varo FX provides multiple effective modes of action on wild oats and kochia. Given the fluroxypern component only has activity on select broadleaf weeds, please explain how Varo FX provides multiple modes of action on grass weeds like wild oats. That's a big one. I can redo it if you want.
Sorry, I just pulled it up. I'm reading it. So in terms of the group 2, there wouldn't be multiple modes of action on our grassy weeds. We're really looking at our tank mix partners to bring those extra modes of action. So the 3-4 modes of action on our broadleaf weeds. Again, not recommending if you have group 2 resistance in your field to spray Varo FX, but it's a good option for cases where there aren't resistant populations or if there are group 1 resistant populations.
Gotcha. So another one, any comments on row spacing and fertility placement to favor the crop?
Yeah, so that's something we don't necessarily look at from Bayer, but there are a lot of resources out there on row spacing and how to make your crop more competitive. So I'd recommend working with your local agronomist, whether that's an independent agronomist or retail agronomist, and they'll be able to help work with your equipment and fertility and seeding rates and figure out what works best for you on your land. So.
Perfect. We got a few more still if you want to keep going. How many years should we be using a product for spraying before we should introduce a different chemical on the same field?
I feel like the sooner the better. Instead of pushing a product to the limits and seeing how long can we take it before we break it, just really starting from ground zero and starting with those rotations and starting early with that. I think the sooner you introduce diverse rotations and herbicides mode of actions, it's going to be better for you to really prolong the lifespan of that product, because when you break it you can't really fix it. So sooner the better.
Got a water volume question. 10 gallons or 5 gallons recommended?
5 gallons is the minimum recommendation.
Yeah, but for in crops, when your canopy, depending on your canopy, we really do like to see you spraying at 10 gallons. I know it's a little bit more hassle to haul some water out there, but it's not like a Roundup. With the modes of action that we're using, we do like to see good coverage. And I think both Amanda and Sam talked about the importance of good coverage of getting that herbicide where it needs to go onto those beets. So 10 gallons is really what we'd like to see.
Gotcha. And then last one I've got here, unless anybody else wants to send some through, is you indicated that there were no options for controlling wild oats in the case of group 1 and 2 resistant biotypes. What about the soil applied herbicides like group 15 herbicides, trilate and pyrosulfone?
Yeah, you're exactly right here. So when we were talking about there's no way to control group 1 and 2 resistant biotypes in crop, but we can do something like a pre-plant incorporated, depending on the crop that you have, like Edge or Avidex. Those are really, really great resistance management tools that you can use. And if you are seeing resistance starting to pop up, or you're just really trying to prevent that, definitely go with one of those pre-plant solutions before your crop. But once you get into your in-crop and you have group 1 and 2 resistant wild oats, there's really nothing you can spray in your wheat or barley crops to control those. In your canola crop, we still have group 9 that we can spray in crop with that glyphosate for those wild oats. But I really do like this question, and I really do like those pre-plant incorporated options.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be our last question. So if anyone has any further questions following this, please reach out to myself and the Bayer team. And again, before we end, here's your chance to collect those CCA, CEU credits in pest management. Like they said, open up the CCA app on your smartphone, click scan course code, hold your phone up to the monitor so the camera hovers over the QR code. And if you're able to do this, the CCU will be submitted immediately. If that doesn't work for you, feel free to send your last name, CCA number to Top Crop at Annex Business Media, and we'll submit that credit for you as well. These instructions will also be found in our follow-up email, which will be sent in around 24 hours. Thanks for tuning in today, and don't forget to visit topcropmanager.com/webinars for all of our previously recorded webinars. I want to thank the Bayer team and the farmer panel. That was great.